The chill of December had seeped into my bones, a permanent resident since the fire. Not the kind that makes I shiver, but a deep, internal cold that settled behind my ribs, just beneath my heart. Every breath felt thin, inadequate. My world had shrunk to the four walls of my rented apartment and the occasional necessary errand. Today, one of those errands pulled me out into the biting air. The fluorescent lights of the pool supply store, December, chlorine order ready, hummed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on the stacked buckets and plastic tubing. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of chemicals, sharp and clean, almost sterile. My eyes, accustomed to dimness, squinted against the artificial brightness. My name was called, a flat, toneless sound, and I walked forward, the squeak of my shoes on the polished concrete floor the loudest thing in the room. "Raj?" the clerk asked, not looking up. "Yes," I managed, my voice a rasp. It always felt like a struggle to speak, to engage. Each word was a tiny shard, pulled from some deep, wounded place. I signed the electronic pad, the pen feeling alien in my hand, and lifted the heavy container. The plastic handle bit into my palm, but I welcomed the faint pain. It was real, something I could feel. As I turned to leave, the cloying scent of chlorine seemed to cling to my clothes, a phantom reminder of the shimmering blue water I had once designed into a home that was now ashes. A home I had poured my heart into, every angle, every curve, every carefully chosen material. And then I had watched it burn, watched them burn. Back in the stale air of my car, the chlorine container sat heavy in the passenger seat. The engine idled, a low thrum against the pervasive quiet. Then my phone buzzed, startling me. I almost dropped it. The screen showed an unknown number, an unfamiliar London area code. I rarely answered calls anymore. Most were automated, or from well-meaning colleagues I had ghosted, their pity a dull ache against my skin. But something, a flicker of something I couldn't name, made me press the green icon. "Mr. Raj Sharma," a crisp, professional voice, female, precise. "My name is Elena Vance. I'm a solicitor with Vance and Harding. I understand this might come as a surprise, but I'm contacting you regarding the estate of your great-aunt, Anjali Sharma." My great-aunt? I felt a sudden sharp jolt like a small electric shock. I hadn't known I had a great-aunt Anjali. My family, what was left of it, had always been a small, contained unit. My parents, my wife, my daughter, all gone. My mind scrambled trying to place the name. Nothing, just a blank, echoing space. "I don't think I know anyone by that name," I said. Words feeling clumsy, inadequate. "Sharma, we've been attempting to locate you. You're her sole surviving relative, and as such, you've inherited her estate. A very old house in a rather secluded location." A house. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. Another house. My breath hitched. The image of flames, orange and ravenous, danced behind my eyelids. I saw the architectural plans, every line and detail morphing into a pyre. My fault, all my fault. The solicitor's voice, calm and detached, was a distant hum against the roar of my memory. I don't want a house." I finally managed, the words catching in my throat. The chlorine smell in the car seemed to intensify, sharp and suffocating. My palms were sweating, sticking to the wheel. "Sharma, I understand this is unexpected. However, there are specific conditions attached to the inheritance. My great-aunt was quite particular. The will stipulates that I must take possession and reside there for a minimum period. If I fail to do so, the estate, including the house, will revert to a charitable trust." Her voice was unwavering, devoid of sympathy, just stating facts. "I have a packet of documents I'd like to send outlining everything. Perhaps a meeting to discuss the details. Reside there, a minimum period." The implications of her words settled over me, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't just an inheritance, it was an obligation, a command. Who was this great-aunt, and why would she impose such a strange condition on a relative she'd never contacted, a relative who hadn't even known she existed? Was this some kind of twisted joke, or something else entirely? What kind of house demanded its inheritor live within its walls? The old house loomed, a silhouette against the bruised December sky. Its gables, like hunched shoulders, seemed to absorb the last dying light, leaving the grounds in perpetual twilight. This was it then, my great-aunt's legacy, a command disguised as an inheritance. The solicitor's words still echoed, a minimum period. I swallowed, the metallic tang of apprehension coating my tongue. I had to make this work, for reasons I wasn't ready to examine too closely. The moving team's truck rumbled up the long, cracked driveway, its tires crunching on loose gravel. I watched their faces as they approached the front door, a mixture of professional indifference and a flicker of something else, a subtle unease that mirrored my own. The air itself felt thick here, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something else, something vaguely sweet, like overripe fruit left too long in a forgotten pantry. The massive oak door, scarred and dark, seemed to breathe out cold as I unlocked it. The interior was a cavern of shadows, dust motes dancing in the meager light filtering through grimy windows. "Just put the boxes in the main hall for now," I told the team leader, my voice sounding thin in the vast space. He nodded, his gaze sweeping the ornate, water-stained wallpaper and the shrouded furniture. Even through the canvas-drop cloths, I could sense the hulking shapes of forgotten lives. This wasn't just a house, it was a mausoleum of memories I didn't own. A tremor ran through me, a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold air seeping from the walls. What secrets did this place hold? Secrets that my gray tant had demanded I uncover. I spent the next few hours in a blur of motion, directing the movers, signing papers, and trying to impose some order on the chaos. My own boxes, few as they were, ended up in what looked like a study, a smaller room off the main hall, with built-in shelves and a fireplace choked with soot. It felt less overwhelming than the larger rooms, almost a sanctuary. I ran a hand over the rough, cold stone of the fireplace mantel, feeling the grit of decades of neglect beneath my fingertips. A faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound seemed to come from behind the wall, like a tiny rodent trying to burrow its way out of the plaster. I froze, listening. Nothing, only the steady beat of my own pulse. Later that afternoon, a sudden thought surfaced through the haze of exhaustion. The solicitor had mentioned a pool, a detail I'd barely registered amidst the strange conditions of the will. And with a pool, even a neglected one, came maintenance. I checked my phone. A message from the clerk at the pool supply store, December, chlorine order ready. I needed to pick it up. The mundane task felt like a lifeline, a tether to the normal world outside this crumbling edifice. The drive was short, the winter air biting and sharp, smelling of pine and impending snow. The pool supply store, December, chlorine order ready sign glowed a cheerful, incongruous blue in the twilight. Inside, the air was thick with the sharp, clean scent of chemicals, a stark contrast to the musty odor of the house. The clerk, a young woman with tired eyes, greeted me. "Raj, my chlorine order's ready. Big one for the old estate, right?" she asked, her voice dropping slightly on old estate. I nodded, feeling a prickle of unease. "That's the one." She slid a heavy bucket across the counter. "Heard that place has been empty for a while. Funny, my gray tant was always so particular about the pool. Even in winter she'd have it cleaned, said it was important, kept things clear." She paused, her gaze drifting past me, as if looking through the glass storefront and down the road towards the hidden house. He was a strange one, my gray tant. Real private. Never saw her with visitors, just her and that big old house. She shrugged, a small, nervous gesture. "Anyway, that'll be 85. I paid the weight of the chlorine bucket, a physical reminder of my new responsibilities. "Kept things clear," she'd said. What did that even mean? Was it a simple statement about pool maintenance or something more? Back in the car, the scent of chlorine, acrid and clean, filled the small space, pushing back against the lingering mustiness of the house that seemed to cling to my clothes. I carried the chlorine bucket inside, setting it down with a thud in the main hall. I walked back into the study, intent on unpacking some books, on making this room mine. The fireplace, which had been choked with soot, now had a single, perfectly clean feather resting on the mantelpiece. It was white, delicate, completely out of place. I hadn't noticed it before. Had it been there when the movers were here? Or was it something else? The biting wind of December tore at my coat as I wrestled the heavy chlorine buckets out of the pool supply store, December, chlorine order ready. My knuckles ached, red and raw from the plastic handles. Inside, the warmth had been thick with the cloying, clean scent of chemicals, a smell that now seemed to cling to my clothes, to my skin. "Kept things clear," the proprietor had said, her voice raspy, a strange knowing glint in her tired eyes. The words echoed in the enclosed space of my car as I drove away, the acrid, clean smell of chlorine filling the small interior, pressing in. Clear. What did that even mean, really? Was it just about the water, or was it a veiled warning, a strange kind of advice I wasn't equipped to understand? My mind, an architect's mind, craved logic, craved structure, but the old house, and now this woman seemed determined to unravel it. The drive home was a blur of frosted fields and skeletal trees. Each turn of the wheel brought me closer to the ancestral home, a place I'd hoped would be a sanctuary, but was steadily becoming something else entirely. The determination that had propelled me through the initial days of clearing cobwebs and dust was now laced with a growing unease. I needed to finish the pool. It was a tangible project, something I could control. Unlike the creeping tendrils of guilt that still tightened around my chest whenever my thoughts drifted to the fire, to my family. The cold settled into my bones, a deeper chill than the winter air could explain. Back at the house, the silence was immediate, absolute. The air inside felt heavier than outside, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else I couldn't quite place, metallic, perhaps, or just the smell of age. I dragged the buckets to the back, to the pool. The dull scrape of plastic against the flagstones loud in the quiet afternoon. The pool itself was a stagnant, dark oval, a mirror reflecting only the oppressive gray sky. I had already skimmed out most of the leaves and debris, but the water remained a murky, impenetrable black-green. It looked less like water and more like some primordial soup, unnervingly still. I began pouring the chlorine, a ritualistic act. The potent chemical hit the water with a hiss, plumes of white vapor rising before dissipating into the heavy air. I worked methodically, emptying bucket after bucket, following the instructions I'd found tucked away in a dusty old maintenance manual. As the last bucket emptied, I stood back, breathing heavily, watching. The surface of the water shimmered, the black-green beginning to lighten, just barely, around the edges. A faint, almost imperceptible current seemed to stir beneath the surface. A subtle eddy that wasn't caused by my pouring. My brow furrowed. It was too slight to be significant, I told myself, just the water settling. I decided to leave it overnight, let the chemicals do their work. The next morning I returned, a strange sense of anticipation tightening my stomach. As I approached the pool, a gasp caught in my throat. The water wasn't just clearer, it was too clear. Impossibly clear. It was as if a veil had been ripped away, leaving the depths exposed, vulnerable. My eyes scanned the bottom, expecting to see a stray leaf, a pebble, anything. Not a pattern in the tiles, but a distinct sprawling stain, a deep rusty brown that snaked across the floor of the pool. It looked like a dried mark. A very large, very old, dried mark. My breath hitched. I knelt, leaning closer, my reflection wavering on the impossibly clear surface. The stain was concentrated near the deep end, spreading outwards like an ink blot. It had a strange texture to it, almost raised, as if whatever had caused it had been absorbed into the very grout. My rational mind scrambled. Iron deposits, a chemical reaction with the chlorine, but the color, the shape. It was too organic, too unsettling. It twisted, thinned, and then thickened again, like a grotesque, sprawling root system etched into the pool's floor. I reached out a trembling finger, almost touching the water, but stopped. A sudden sharp chill pierced me deeper than the cold air. The stain seemed to pulse, faintly in my peripheral vision, though when I focused, it was still inert. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum. I stood up, backing away slowly, my eyes still fixed on the unsettling mark. The "kept things clear" comment from the proprietor resonated with a new, horrifying clarity. She hadn't been talking about maintenance. He had been talking about hiding something. This stain, revealed by the powerful chlorine, had been hidden under layers of murky water, perhaps for decades. What had it been? What could leave such a mark, so deep, so permanent, at the bottom of a swimming pool? My mind raced, trying to conjure a logical explanation, but none came. I had wanted to clean the pool, to bring order to this neglected space, but instead, I felt like I had disturbed something ancient, something that had been purposefully obscured. What else had the murkiness been hiding? Inside, the warmth had been thick with the cloying, clean scent of chemicals, a smell that now clung to my clothes, to my skin. It was the smell of something sanitized, something scrubbed clean of life, and it felt wrong somehow, a stark contrast to the ancient, earthy scent of the house waiting for me. I shifted the first bucket, the plastic digging into my palm, and the clerk, a young man with too many piercings, watched me with an unreadable expression. Was it pity, curiosity? He didn't offer to help, just stood by the counter, polishing a spot that wasn't there, his eyes flicking to the buckets, then to me, then to the door. I pulled the second one, grunting with the effort, the cold air stinging my face. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed, a low, persistent drone that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. It felt like an interrogation room, the bright, sterile light revealing every flaw, every strain. A shiver, unrelated to the cold, traced its way up my spine. Why did I feel so exposed here? Amidst the gleaming white plastic and the sharp tang of disinfectants, I finally got both buckets into the bed of my truck, the plastic clanking against the metal. My breath plumed in the frigid air. The clerk was still watching from the doorway, a static shadow against the artificial glow of the store. He didn't wave, he didn't nod, he simply observed. I slammed the tailgate shut, the sound echoing sharply in the quiet afternoon. As I climbed into the cab, I caught his eye one last time. There was something in his gaze, a flicker of understanding, or perhaps just a reflection of my own growing unease. What did he see? The drive back to the ancestral home was a blur of frosted fields and skeletal trees. The chlorine smell, now trapped in the truck with me, was sickeningly sweet, a sickly promise of cleanliness that the house would never truly accept. The house loomed ahead, a silhouette against the bruised purple of the winter sky, its windows like vacant eyes. A part of me wanted to keep driving, to leave the buckets and the house and the crushing weight of its history behind, but I couldn't. I had to understand. I had to fix it. Unloading the buckets felt heavier than before. Each step up the crumbling path, each creak of the old floorboards as I carried them inside, was a conscious effort. The air within the house was stagnant, thick with the scent of damp wood and something else, something metallic and old, like forgotten blood. I deposited the chlorine by the old, dry pool in the enclosed sunroom, its cracked concrete basin a testament to years of neglect. The house was waiting. I pulled out my architectural toolkit, the familiar weight of the measuring tape, the level, the flashlight, a small comfort in the suffocating quiet. This was my language. This was how I understood the world, how I built order out of chaos. I needed to find a logical explanation. I started in the basement, the lowest point, the foundation. The air down there was cooler, carrying the damp, earthy smell of soil and old stone. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, dancing over rough-hewn timbers and mortared stone walls. The floor was packed earth in some sections, crude concrete in others. As I moved deeper, my architect's eye began to pick out anomalies. This house was old, built in stages clearly, but some sections didn't make sense. A stretch of the southern wall particularly seemed off. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to an untrained eye, but I saw it. It was like a scar, poorly healed. I ran my gloved hand over the rough surface. I tapped the wall, listening. Most sections returned a solid, dead thud. It wasn't the sound of an empty cavity, but of something behind the stone, something that changed the density. I tapped again, methodically, moving my fingers along the seam where the newer-looking stone met the older. The sound was distinct, a small, concealed space. It was too low to be a window, too narrow for a doorway. What would they hide down here in the earth, beneath the foundation? My pulse hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a structural flaw. This was deliberate. Someone had built a section of wall, then disguised it. Why? I got down on my knees, shining the flashlight beam directly onto the seam. Dust motes danced in the light. The mortar was indeed different, a slightly finer aggregate, a more uniform color. It spoke of a repair, a cover-up. What was this house keeping secret? Inside, the warmth had been thick with the cloying, clean scent of chemicals, a smell that now clung to my clothes, a phantom promise of purity against the house's persistent rot. The weight of the buckets pressed into my arms, a dull, insistent ache that radiated up my shoulders. Each step on the cracked pavement felt like a deliberate effort, the cold seeping through the thin soles of my boots. The sky, a bruised purple, threatened snow. The drive back was a blur of frosted windows and icy roads. My breath plumed in the cold cabin, a small, transient cloud. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, not expecting to see anything, but unable to shake the familiar prickle of being watched, a sensation that had become a constant companion since my arrival. The isolation of the long, winding road only intensified the feeling of vulnerability. Unloading the buckets was harder here. I dragged them, one by one, towards the dilapidated door that led to the old, unused indoor pool, each scrape of plastic against stone, a tiny violation of the overwhelming quiet. The air inside the pool room was stagnant, thick with the smell of damp earth, and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet. A scent I couldn't quite place, but which tightened my stomach. My breath plumed again, visible in the dim light filtering through the grimy, leaded windows. I fumbled for the light switch. The pool itself was a nightmare. The water was a sickly green, almost black in places, with a thick scum of algae clinging to the tiled edges. Leaves and debris floated on the surface, undisturbed for years. It was a stagnant mirror, reflecting the flickering bulb and my own anxious face. This place had been neglected for decades, a monument to decay. I could almost feel the weight of time, the layers of neglect pressing down, suffocating. I forced myself to focus. This was practical. This was something I could control. I tore open the first bucket, the sharp, clean smell of chlorine momentarily cutting through the other insidious odors. I began to pour, slowly, deliberately, watching the chemicals plume into the stagnant water, hoping to shock it back to some semblance of life. As the chlorine diffused, a strange clarity began to form in my mind, not just about the pool, but about the house itself. The way the chemicals were meant to purify, to strip away the rot, suddenly felt like a metaphor for something deeper, something horrifying. I remembered the old ledger, the cryptic entries, not just names, but brief, stark notes about previous inhabitants. Lost a child, driven to despair, overcome by sorrow. They weren't just descriptions, they felt like ingredients, the metallic sweetness in the air. It wasn't decay, not entirely. It was a familiar tang, one I'd smelled before briefly in the immediate aftermath of the fire. A specific kind of residue, not ash, but a different kind of ending, one that etched itself into memory. My hands, still raw from the bucket handles, began to tremble. This wasn't just a house. It was a crucible. Entity didn't just exist here. It fed the previous inhabitants, their grief, their despair. It wasn't just present. It was cultivated, like a harvest. The house didn't just contain sorrow, it processed it. The entity, whatever it was, consumed it. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, stealing my breath. The house wasn't just a place where tragedy happened. It caused it, or more accurately, it amplified it. It was a magnet for suffering. And then it devoured the emotional wreckage. My own grief, the crushing weight of it, the guilt that clung to me like a shroud. I was feeding it. Every moment I spent here, every memory that clawed at me, every regret, it was all sustenance. The chlorine meant to purify felt suddenly ironic, a cruel joke. The flicker of the bare bulb seemed to intensify, then dim again. They seemed to writhe, not just from the light, but with a life of their own, coiling around the edges of my vision. My mouth was dry, metallic fear coating my tongue. A faint ripple disturbed the stagnant surface of the pool, not from the chlorine I'd poured, but from somewhere deeper. A slow, deliberate movement. What if the entity wasn't just in the house? What if it was of the house? And what if now it had tasted my grief, my guilt, and found it delectable? I could feel it on my exposed skin, an icy caress. It felt like it was inviting me to give more, to drown, my eyes fixed on the pool's surface. The ripple was gone, but something else remained, a shape that was too still, too deliberate. Was it waiting for me to join the others, or was it already here watching from the depths? Inside, the warmth had been thick with the cloying, clean scent of chemicals, a smell that now clung to my clothes, sharp and sterile. It was a smell of control, of purification, and for a desperate moment, I actually believed it could cleanse the rot from my ancestral home. The attendant, a thin woman with tired eyes, had watched me struggle, her expression unreadable. She hadn't asked why I needed such a large quantity of pool cleaner in the dead of winter. Perhaps she didn't care, or perhaps she knew somehow what I was up against. The drive back was a blur of icy roads and a growing knot in my stomach. Each bump of the road, each shudder of the old pickup truck, echoed the frantic beat of my own heart. I kept picturing the house, its dark windows like vacant eyes watching my approach. The chlorine buckets clanked in the truck bed, a promise of a fight. My determination, fueled by a potent cocktail of fear and a desperate need for peace, hardened with every mile. I would face it. I would burn it out or drown it or whatever it took. This was my home, and I would reclaim it. As I pulled into the long, gravel driveway, the air grew colder, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like old blood and decaying flowers. It was the house's breath, I realized, exhaling its corruption. It was an invitation, a taunt. It knew I was coming back. It had been waiting. My first instinct was to turn around, to drive, until the old house was nothing more than a bad memory in my rearview mirror. But the image of my family, their faces blurred by smoke and time, flashed behind my eyes. I couldn't run, not again. I cut the engine. I grabbed the first heavy bucket, the plastic handle biting into my palm. The front door groaned open further as I approached, as if a silent servant had anticipated my arrival. My breath plumed in front of me. I could hear nothing but the frantic thumping of my own pulse against my ribs. I walked straight to the living room, the source of so much torment, the place where the entity had first shown its true colors. I hauled the first bucket, then another, into the center of the room. I wrestled the lid off the first bucket, the plastic groaning under my strained grip. Let the chlorine burn away the malevolence, scour the very essence of the thing that fed on my grief. I tipped the bucket. Nothing. The heavy liquid, usually quick to slosh, remained stubbornly still, clinging to the bottom of the container. I tilted it further, straining, my muscles screaming. It felt as if an invisible hand was pressing down on the contents, holding them fast. A low hum vibrated through the floorboards, a sound I felt more than heard, resonating deep in my chest. The floor beneath my feet felt like it was alive, shifting, breathing. The walls around me seemed to lean inward. I tried to lift the bucket again, but it was glued to my hand, impossibly heavy, its weight increasing with every passing second. My fingers cramped around the handle, losing all sensation. I dropped the bucket. It hit the floor with a dull thud, the plastic container miraculously intact, still brimming with the unspilled chlorine. Panic tightened its icy grip. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy. No signal, of course. The house always isolated me. I stumbled backward, away from the inert bucket, away from the suffocating presence that now filled the room. I had to get out. I ran for the front door, my boots skidding on the polished wood. I twisted. It didn't budge. I pulled. Harder. The door was locked, bolted, impassable. I hadn't locked it. I hadn't even closed it properly. I threw my shoulder against the thick oak, grunting with effort. The door didn't give, not an inch. Desperation clawed at my throat. I spun around, scanning the room, my eyes darting from the high windows to the archway leading to the dining room. No light penetrated. The archway, it was no longer an opening. A solid wall of aged wood, seamless and unmarred, stood where the passage had been moments before. It spoke my name. Raj. My name stretched and distorted, a mocking echo. It wasn't just in the house, it was the house. I was trapped. The chlorine, my weapon, lay useless on the floor, a cruel joke. What did it want from me now? Inside, the warmth had been thick with the cloying, clean scent of chemicals, a smell that now, out here, seemed to cling to my clothes, a sterile shroud against the damp, biting air. The sky above was a bruised purple, threatening snow, and the streetlights were already casting long, weak shadows across the slick pavement. I could feel the cold sinking into my bones, a deeper cold than the weather alone could account for. A strange tension prickled at the back of my neck. As I heaved the last bucket into the back of my truck, I caught a glimpse of myself in the tinted window of the store. My reflection was distorted, stretched, and for a split second, I saw something else, a flicker of movement behind me, a shape that wasn't there when I turned. Just the wind, I told myself, whipping a discarded plastic bag across the parking lot. Drive back to the house was a blur of gray roads and flickering streetlights. The buckets rattled in the truck bed, their chemical scent now mixing with the damp earth and decay that seemed to cling to the house's very structure. I parked, the engine cutting out with a final shudder, leaving me in the profound quiet of the property. I dragged the buckets towards the derelict pool at the back, the plastic scraping over dead leaves and cracked concrete. The pool water was a murky, stagnant green, choked with algae and debris. I told myself the chlorine was for the pool, a desperate, futile attempt at cleanliness, at scrubbing away the rot that festered beneath the surface. But a part of me knew I was trying to purify something far deeper, something that no chemical could touch. The air around the pool was thick with the smell of stagnant water and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like old, dried blood. It was newer, a patch that didn't quite match the crumbling. Original pour, curiosity, a dangerous, persistent thing, urged me closer. I knelt, scraping away the dirt and loose pebbles with my raw fingertips. The crack widened, revealing a small, almost perfectly square indentation. My breath hitched. It was a shallow depression, barely larger than my palm, and within it rested a small, tarnished brass locket. It looked ancient, its surface dulled by time and exposure. The hinge was stiff, but with a grunt of effort, it gave way. Inside, instead of a faded photograph, were two tiny, intricately folded pieces of parchment, brittle with age. I unfolded the first, my fingers trembling. The script was elegant but cramped, faded ink on yellowed paper. It was a name, my family name, repeated several times, alongside dates that stretched back centuries. Below that, a series of symbols, intricate and unsettling, unfamiliar yet strangely resonant. My vision blurred for a moment, the words swimming. I forced myself to focus, my heart thrumming against my ribs. The second parchment was even more disturbing. The chosen sacrifice. My mind reeled. This wasn't just an entity haunting my house, it was tied to me, to my family. The guilt, the grief that had been my constant companion since the fire, suddenly felt like more than just an emotional burden. It was sustenance. It was bait. The metallic taste of fear coated my tongue, bitter and sharp. I wasn't just a victim. I was the culmination, the architect of my own family's suffering, yes, but also the unwitting heir to a legacy far more terrifying than I could have imagined. The house wasn't just a place of torment, it was a cage, and I, Raj, was the final offering. It was inside, waiting, but what exactly did it demand, and how long did I have before it came to collect? The words still echoed in my mind, a cold, hard knot in my gut, the chosen sacrifice. It wasn't just a ghost, not some random horror I could simply flee. It was me, my family, my legacy, the guilt, the grief, the constant companion since the fire. It wasn't just an emotion anymore. It was a tether, a meal, but the fear that had gripped me, that had made me want to run, had curdled into something else. A resolve, a cold, bitter determination. I wouldn't be a sacrifice. I wouldn't let it win. I had to fight. My hands, still trembling slightly, moved over the spines of ancient books, the leather dry and cracked beneath my fingertips. Dust motes danced in the weak afternoon light filtering through the tall windows, making the air thick and hazy. I pulled out old ledgers, architectural journals, anything that might hold a clue. The smell of aged paper and forgotten lives filled my nostrils, a musty perfume of history. Hours bled into each other. I meticulously examined old blueprints of the house, unrolling them on the massive mahogany table. They were intricate, beautiful, but beneath the precise lines and elegant curves, I sought something hidden. A pattern, a symbol. My fingers traced the walls, the foundations, the hidden passages I'd already found. Nothing jumped out, not at first. My eyes burned, my head ached with the effort of concentration. Then, tucked inside a leather-bound diary, its pages brittle and yellowed. I found it. The script was cramped, elegant, but frantic in places. The flower itself felt dry and rough, like ancient parchment beneath my thumb. One entry, dated almost a century ago, spoke of the cleansing waters, and another, weeks later, mentioned the bitter solace of preservation, a ward against decay. The words, disjointed as they were, sparked a flicker of recognition. A memory. My mind raced. Cleansing waters, preservation, decay. I thought back to the odd, almost clinical smell I sometimes detected in the deepest parts of the house, a faint, metallic tang beneath the rot. It had reminded me of something sterile, something used for purification. I folded the diary carefully, the dried flower still nestled within its pages, and tucked it into my coat pocket. The house watched me, I knew it. It didn't want me to find answers, but I was done being prey. I had a destination. The drive was a blur of December gray. The city lights, usually a comfort, seemed distant, muted. The air outside was sharp, carrying the bite of impending winter. Inside, the air was thick with the distinct, almost aggressive scent of chlorine. It was overwhelming, sharp, stinging the back of my throat, but also, strangely, a relief. Chlorine order ready. The attendant, a young man with a perpetually tired expression, called out from behind the counter. He didn't look up from his phone, just gestured towards a stack of heavy, white plastic containers. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from a strange mix of anticipation and adrenaline. This was it. This was the first step. My eyes scanned the shelves, rows upon rows of chemicals, filters, testing kits. Each item was mundane, ordinary, yet in my mind, they took on a desperate significance. I needed to know more about the cleansing waters, about preservation. Could a simple chemical, a common household agent, truly be a weapon against something so ancient, so malevolent? The thought seemed absurd, yet the diary entry had been specific. As the attendant finally looked up, pushing a clipboard my way, his eyes briefly met mine. For a split second, a flicker of something passed through them, not recognition, not fear, but a strange, distant awareness. Or maybe it was just the reflection of the harsh overhead lights. I signed the form, my hands steady despite the tremor in my chest. The weight of the containers as I loaded them into the back of my car felt significant, substantial, a tangible action against an ethereal threat. Back on the road, the chlorine containers clunking softly in the trunk, I felt a new kind of tension. But what if I could poison its well? What if I could make myself indigestible? The diary had spoken of bitter solace. What did that truly mean, and how could I use it? It was me, my family, my legacy. It was a terror, a living, breathing entity that had been stalking me, waiting for me to break. The sudden warmth inside was a shock, thick with the sharp, clean tang of chemicals, chlorine, bromine, 100 different solutions for 100 different problems, all promising purity. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on the rows of plastic containers, brushes, and nets. It was a mundane place, sterile and practical, a stark contrast to the decaying grandeur of the house, yet the unease clung to me, a persistent static charge on my skin. I was here for my chlorine order ready, a desperate attempt at normalcy, at maintaining the pool at the house. A young store clerk, a woman with unnaturally bright eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them, looked up from a computer screen. "Raj," he asked, his voice a little too sweet, a little too knowing. Had I given my name over the phone? I couldn't remember. "Your order's ready, just the usual, right? Super Shark, pH balancer, and a few jugs of liquid chlorine." She moved with a strange, fluid grace, gliding down the aisle, her movements almost a sway. I watched her, my breath catching. She paused by a stack of large chlorine containers, turning to face me fully, clear, sparkling. She picked up a jug, turning it in her hands. The plastic creaked. "But sometimes what I really need isn't to clean it. Sometimes I need to let it get murky, let things settle at the bottom. That's where the real truth lies, isn't it?" Her eyes, those unnaturally bright eyes, seemed to bore into me, reflecting the harsh, fluorescent light like polished glass. My skin prickled, aware. This wasn't just a store clerk. He was a conduit, a messenger. "What are I talking about?" I managed, my voice rough. My throat felt dry, metallic, fear coating my tongue. She set the jug down, her gaze never leaving mine. "The old places," she said, her voice barely audible now. "They say they're haunted by ghosts, sad spirits. But it's not the spirits that are sad, Raj. It's the people, the spirits, they just feed." She stepped closer, the smell of concentrated chemicals suddenly overwhelming, burning my nostrils. "They feed on the sorrow, the regret. They don't cause it, I see, they just cultivate it, like a gardener tending a prize rose. They make it bloom, make it beautiful, make it so rich, so deep that I'd rather drown in it than ever see the light again." Her hand reached out, brushing against the back of my hand. The touch was icy, sharp, like a shard of broken glass. A jolt went through me, not of pain, but of recognition. This was the entity's method. It didn't inflict the grief. It amplified what was already there, nurturing it until it consumed, until I became the perfect, willing sacrifice. My fingers curled into fists. No, not me, not willingly. The thought, raw and defiant, surged through me, a sudden rush of adrenaline. I pulled my hand back sharply, breaking her touch. The clerk's smile faltered, a flicker of something ancient and hungry in her bright eyes. The air grew heavy, thick with unseen presence. I saw it then in the depths of her gaze, not her, but it, looking out, a silent promise of endless despair. "I'll take the order," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I would not drown, I would not be cultivated. The chlorine, the symbol of purification, felt like a weapon now, not just a mundane purchase. The weight of it was grounding. "Ring me up." She watched me, her head tilted slightly, that strange smile returning, but this time it seemed more predatory than sweet. What would happen if I refused to play its game? What happens when the chosen sacrifice refuses to be sacrificed?